I keep seeing the same problem with AI-generated product videos. There are a lot of great tools for generating and rendering the content, but without additional effort, the resulting video feels bland and empty, like it was made out of the generic placeholder. What's missing is the curated visual direction and the use of the relevant design language that can guide the agent to produce a more consistent result and visually pleasing. So I recently saw this project by JTEL who created a skill pipeline which basically allows you to collect and manually curate a collection of design elements, and then the skill pipeline would synthesize those elements and references into a single skill that you could attach to your agent to produce a consistent, aesthetically pleasing results. Even though taste skill is built primarily for UI elements and the front-end design, I want to try it out for video generation. So I'm gonna collect references for UI elements that I found online, and then I'm gonna synthesize a taste skill, and we will try to create 2 videos using Hyperframes. One video would be straight prompt, no additional skills, no references, and another video would be exactly the same prompt, but that time we will include the taste skill that we will synthesize from our reference images. And we would be able to inspect the results, which one is better, which one is more aesthetically pleasing and consistent on brand. The specific video I want to generate today is for the product that I'm building called SlideShot. And as a part of the onboarding, I have a selector for different agents with the instruction how the user could connect SlideShot to their agent of choice. However, right now it's plain text, maybe some images, and what I want to do is to also give people a video instruction to make it more engaging and more clear what exactly is expected from them. I'm going to be using Hyperframes first to generate both of those videos with taste and without taste. And I already installed the agent skill that they have using this command, npx skills at heygen.com hyperframes. So let's try generating our first video without using any reference design. To get a better result, I'm going to actually copy it as the HTML completely instead of just copying the text. Usually it gives more context to the model when you just get the whole reference. So I'm gonna copy the whole element block basically with images, and the agent would copy those images and use them when generating the video. Okay, so here's our prompt. I just say, I want you to create a 40 seconds video demo visualization. I pasted the instructions below. I specified that it should be 16 by 9, and I think this should be enough to create the first version of the video. It took almost 30 minutes, but it seems like we're almost done with the video. And at the very end, you could see that Claude is just amazed by its own capabilities. It says step 2 is excellent. Step 3, nailed it. Intro is gorgeous. Fascinating. So now we need to wait for the final validations and check to pass. Basically, agent right now is just executing the video frame by frame in this instance of Chrome, which the agent controls. And then we will get Hyperframes video editor opened as well. All right, 30 minutes in and we have our video ready. Let's check it out now. So it seems like the agent has basically figured out the general color palette that we're using from that HTML that I pasted. It used the real screenshots, it seems like, but the cursor is synthetic, and it tried to add those rings to the area that is clickable. And sometimes it is a little bit off from the actual screenshot, but it tries its best. And as you can see in the bottom, there are steps. So generally, it's not a bad result for the first one shot of the video from the single prompt. But now let's actually try using a taste skill and see how far we can push it aesthetic-wise. So again, you can try using taste directly from this website, or it's also open source. You can also connect your API key via Open Router, but I'm going to use a local copy that I cloned before. So this is the GitHub repo, and you can see all the instructions are here. With some examples even. So if you look at those examples of the base result generated without any skills, then this was generated with the front-end design skill, and this is the result with taste. So you can see there is quite a bit of difference of the quality that we can get in terms of how clean it is, how minimalistic. Most of the heavy lifting for taste skill is actually done by the reference images. So the better reference images you can find, the better output you will get. So there are a few places you could look for inspiration for those kind of elements. I have a few of them saved here. So one of them is variant.com. This is basically an endless feed of generated UI with already some aesthetics in mind and the presets. So you could browse this feed and collect different pieces of the UI that you want to incorporate in your final video. So another place would be godly.website. So here it's mainly all centered around landing pages, but I think you could still find relevant inspiration or design elements from this infinite collection of websites from here. So now I'm actually going to take a few screenshots from here so we could create our collection. For example, I quite like the composition of this frame, so I'm gonna screenshot it and then save it for later. I quite like the layout on this page, so I'm gonna screenshot a very specific composition of the card and the title. This element looks quite pleasing as well, I would say. So I'm gonna be very focused around the elements that I'm collecting. I wouldn't want to take screenshots of the whole page necessarily, because the idea behind the taste skill is that it extracts why a certain element or composition works within the context of the overall page. So we could also collect this one. I quite like the colors as well. This could be a nice reference. And I like this specific composition as well. So let's take a screenshot of the overall layout. So I already cloned a taste repository locally, and they have this reference images folder, which is where you are expected to place all your images. I'm just gonna paste everything that we collected so far. And now to kick off the generation pipeline for the skill, you need to run taste command from that repository. And basically to enable AI to actually process each of the image, you have to provide your API key in the project. However, in my local fork, I modified it a little bit so that it could use a CLI command, not just API key that you can place in the environment file, but also using a CLI like Claude or Codex directly from the terminal. And also important thing here is that the pipeline uses both Claude and Codex to evaluate the same images, and then it extracts the relevant information before synthesizing the final file. So let's kick it off and wait for a bit until all our screenshots are processed. And it's done. It roughly took around 12 minutes, but with the power of editing, for you, it's instant. So let's check it out what kind of skills we're getting. Basically, it saves the final skill after processing all the images. It saves it into the hidden .taste folder, and each run that you create, it will create a new skill. So for the current run in this folder, we basically have all the nodes after processing of each of the image. So the raw nodes would be processing from Claude and from OpenAI GPT model. And then once we get the raw nodes, then we get synthesized version, which is a combined assessment from Claude and GPT 5.5. And then finally, based on this combined assessments, a rule set is created. Also, it's broken into chunks, but here are some of the rules and the design grammar. All of those details are produced. And then at the end, we are getting the final skill that's supposed to encompass all the reference images that we prepared upfront. So now let's actually place this skill into the hyperframes and try to generate the video again. So now let me paste exactly the same prompt we used, but this time, in addition to calling hyperframes skill, we would also call taste skill. 15 minutes in, and Claude finished creating and rendering the final video. So let's check it out. All right, so we have the first scene introducing the tutorial. Then step number 1, Hyperframes again tried to create the rings around the focus area. Now you see that in some places it missed the coordinates a little bit, but it still added the synthetic cursor just to indicate where the user can click. And this is the final step. Nice. I mean, it generally looks much better composition-wise, I would say. We will compare it to the original one, but just from this look, you can see that the composition is now more structured. Steps, I would say, are less crowded. So let's compare it with the previous version. So generally, if you look at the lights and theme and color palette, they are mostly the same, just because in the prompt I included that the agent should use light and warm colors. However, let's take a look at the video without taste skill. So look at this scene, for example. We have quite a few elements in here. The wrapping of the words is not ideal. It looks quite busy, especially with the colors of the ghost 1 number in the background. And we are generally reusing the same layout for every next scene. So again, looks quite busy. Step element is imbalanced with the total number of steps, and then we have number of steps here. And then this is the final scene before we complete. We can, I would say, disregard the rings because it feels like the agent is struggling to understand the exact area where to click, but without additional instructions, it managed to predict what is the main call to action of each individual screenshot that we provided. And that's basically the final frame. So we have this generic icon, you are connected, to indicate that it's done. And now let's actually look at the version that was generated with taste. So first of all, before I start, there are some artifacts in here, but the general color theme is very similar. But if you look again, so now those elements are consistently stacked on the left side, and they will keep this consistent positioning for the next scene. So again, here, look, we have the step label, we have the name, the description, and the description of the final video. Again, this composition, I would say, compared to the version without the taste, so let's look at the second step, looks much more cohesive with the ghost number in the background and the elements underneath for the link, even though it's basically the same layout. So I have a suspicion that probably Hyperframes skills overtook some of our taste instructions, because Hyperframes looks at different patterns when generating each of the scene. But still, with taste, this version turned out to be a little bit lighter compared to this one, I would say. And then let's continue watching that video with taste skill. Nice. So now, as you can see, even comparing the final slide, the difference is very subtle, but in terms of the positioning and the layout, the version where we used taste and references turned out to be much simpler and more cohesive, I would say. This one still feels rather generic in a comparative way. So that was an interesting experiment. Even though the taste skill generation pipeline is designed primarily for UI elements, you can see that when we are applying it to the video generation pipeline, we can still get better layout, overall layout, and the composition, even though it might be overtaken by some of the patterns that are built in into tools like Hyperframes or other similar tools. I'm going to continue to experiment with the taste skill and figuring out how we can set up the pipeline in a way that would be taking into account our specific brand guidelines or our specific goals. For example, you could imagine you could collect reference images from various sources for different purposes. Maybe there is a folder of reference images specifically for social media posts or for educational posts. And then you could see how you could generate a taste skill based on each of those references and then use them in different circumstances. However, I still feel that directly applying taste just bluntly in the same prompt might not be as prominent as you would see in the actual UI. So maybe there are some additional tweakings necessary to actually make the effect of the taste skill more prominent. Let me know if you'd like me to test any other tools that would help you keep the video on brand consistently across the video generation. I would be curious to hear your workflow if you have any pipelines for generating those videos with the brand guidelines in mind. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.